Okay, grade 11s, let's get started. So hopefully you've now created a new Java project called Mind Graphics Examples. And let me just stop for a second. Let's just talk about where we're at here. Here's our vocabulary list now, having come up through all the units this year. And really, there's just been 3 units up to this point: the methods unit, the arrays unit, and then the classes unit. And what I've created here is a vocabulary list. And as you can see, the methods unit was simple. There was really just 4 words to learn: method, parameter, argument, and overloading. Those are really just the 4 words that we did in the methods unit. An incredibly important unit for coding, but it didn't have many words to remember. Arrays unit: array, index, traverse, matrix. Also not that many words. You could also put length on there. That was maybe a word you had to learn in that unit. But not that many words to learn. But in the classes unit, there was a lot more terminology there. A lot more sort of words for how that kind of stuff happened. Words like constructor and class and object and properties and methods and superclass and encapsulation. Lots of wording there for kind of grasping the concepts. And the reason that is the way it is classes is really the basis of object-oriented programming. And it's what made graphics kind of happen, is this idea of object-oriented programming. So that's why, rather than in the grade 10 course where I start with graphics, in the grade 11 course I come back to graphics at the end, because now you have a deep understanding, hopefully, of some of the concepts that you're going to see when you create graphics. Okay, so just a real quick, some stuff from our last unit on classes, right? So a class, public-private properties. The private ones are encapsulated. Public-private methods. Private methods are encapsulated. You can have 2 classes communicate with one another. In other words, one class can, for example, use or instantiate another class. And that's what's called has-a relationship, right? So one class has another one, okay? So 2 classes can communicate that way. As well, if we take it to the next level, 2 classes can communicate with each other through a different relationship known as inheritance with an is-a relationship. In our example back in classes, we had the student class, which was derived from the person class. So a student is a person. This inheritance with superclasses and subclasses took it to a whole new level. Okay? So when you created inheritance, you derived all the traits of the superclass. Okay? So maybe you can think of it like this, if I use it like a little building plan. Okay? So this is like a building. So let's say this is my class called student. Well, a student is a person. So everything that is a person is already inside of the student class. So it's like it has access to everything that is in the person building already inside of this other building. Now, outside the class, we could have some other class that wants to communicate with our students. Well, it can get in through these doors. It can get in through the public door, and it can get in through this public door. So it can access methods through the public door. It can access properties through the public door. It can't get in to the private areas. They're locked away. That's encapsulation. But within the class itself, we can travel all through, right? We can get through here, we can get through here, we can get through here and in here, and we can get through all that stuff within the class, okay? So private methods and private properties are still accessible within the class, but not outside the class. And we build classes to kind of take advantage of that. Okay, we create classes through a design to do that. I want to use the actual game of life example as kind of an example of that we did in class. So the game of life example is we made a matrix class that had some private properties, columns, row, and a grid. We had some public methods like constructors and a set method. We had some private methods. And again, I don't know if all of you did this example. Then we made a game grid class, and a game grid is a matrix. So everything that was built into matrix is now part of game grid. And we built methods that were public with that, like kill and number of neighbors, etc. And then we even used something like a toolbox class, where we used a whole bunch of useful methods got put into a public area. We put a whole bunch of useful properties into a public area. And then we kind of created the game of life that way. So we had like a main class that called the game grid class, that used the matrix class, and then we had the toolbox class. We had the classes talking to each other and communicating to make the program work. That's what we did. Okay? And so what we're going to do today is the same thing. We're going to build classes. We're going to build a class that has some areas public. So it's like having an open door here. And some areas private, which means we can only get at it through inside the class. We're going to do that. So there's going to be some methods in here. There's going to be some properties in here that might be public or private. And same with here, methods and properties. And then we might have other classes communicate with that through the design interface that we create. But as well, we're going to create inheritance, an is relationship with some other class. And here's where the key lies. This class up here that we're going to be inheriting from is not ours. We're going to import a class to do this, which means we're going to bring in a bunch of code that somebody else wrote to give us the ability to work with graphics. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're not going to start from the scratch, from the ground up. We're going to import a bunch of stuff that let us play with graphics. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it through a series of examples. So let's get started with our first example. So right here in main, we're going to make something called graphics 1. This will be the name of the class we're going to make. We'll just call it graphics 1 equals a new graphics 1. Okay? So this is going to be a class that we're going to make. We're going to make a class called graphics 1. Pretty simple. So if you want, you can go up here and go file new class, blah, blah, blah. Or, because Java recognizes that this class doesn't exist, you can actually use the light bulb to create the class. Now be careful when you use the light bulb that you click on the first option, not the second option. What would happen with the second option, I'll explain a little bit later. Okay? But make sure you create the one in the package. So it should basically do something, not quite like this because it won't be quite this complicated. Yours will look something like that. You'll just say class graphics 1. Correct? Okay. So again, from here, we wrote that. Graphics 1 equals new graphics 1. And it will build something called graphics 1 for us. What it doesn't do, which I'm going to recommend we do, is in front of the word class, put the word public. You'd think by default it would do that, but it doesn't quite do that. Okay? That should clear up your error back here in main, so you should no longer have an error. Back here. Now right now this is just a blank class. It has basically, if you were to draw a diagram of it, whoa, flying pen. It would look very simple. It would look basically incredibly boring. It would just be this. Something called graphics 1. It doesn't even have a constructor at this point. It has no properties, no methods. But we're about to change that by just adding 2 simple words to this. We're going to bring in something we learned in the previous unit, inheritance. And we're going to make this incredibly powerful. At the top line, in what's called the class signature up here, at the end of this, we're going to say extends. And here's where we're going to use an existing class called the Jframe class. Now the Jframe class is a class that's already built in to, well, it's not built in. It's something that we're going to import. So it's going to give you a little error, but the light bulb will show you what you're supposed to import. And you can just click it. And at the top of your code, it should now say that. Okay? This line of code should appear at the top now. If it doesn't, type it in. Okay? That will clear your error here. So now graphics 1 is a Jframe, whatever Jframe is. Jframe, as you can see, is a library of code that comes from another library called the Swing library. The Swing library also comes from another library called the JavX library. The X stands for extension. So it's an extension of Java. It's extending Java out, and it's creating a library called Swing. Swing is basically just a bunch of graphics stuff. And actually, you can even look inside there to see kind of what some of the stuff is, using some of the little tricks we've learned. If I go here, don't do this, but if I just put the dot and then press Control Spacebar, you can see all the kind of stuff that's inside a Swing. So here you can see all kinds of stuff like sliders and spinners and toolbars, and there's a ton of graphic stuff already in there that we're going to start exploring. Okay? So the fact that I just did that, the fact that I just made graphics 1 into a Jframe, gave it tremendous amount of power. Because now graphics 1 has all the properties and methods of whatever's built into Jframe. Cool. So let's build a constructor for it. Public constructors, remember, have no return type, have the same name as the class, so graphics 1. Constructors that have no parameters are called default constructors, which is what this one is. So graphics 1 is what the name of this class is. We can take a look at what's already inside it by putting the keyword this. Remember, this means the current object, dot. And you'll see already built into this class is a ton of methods and properties. It's already done for us. We have to kind of learn how to use them, but we've already got them kind of built in. Okay, so what a Jframe is essentially what you would have called a form back in C# days. And actually, maybe let's just take a quick recall of what C# looked like back here in grade 10. When you first started C#, you didn't have to worry about all this coding stuff right away. You may recall when you worked in C# and you created a new project, okay, this C# compiler took care of a lot of the stuff for you. So you went Windows form thing, and it would just automatically take care of a lot of that behind the scenes stuff for you. And it would start you off, as you recall back in grade 10, with what was called a form, like right away, which is essentially just a little window for your application. And there it was. There was your form. And if you played this in C# without writing any code whatsoever, it would pop up on the screen. You could move it around, you could resize it, you could open and close it. It was already done for you. Well, that's essentially what we've done now by adding Jframe to this. But we have to add a little bit more just to make it appear. Because right now, if I just try and run this, it will run. But nothing is visible. Like, I can't see anything. So nothing happens at this point. So I have to add a little bit of code to this. I have to say things like this dot set. And one of the things I have to do is I have to give it a size. So I'm going to say set size, and I have to give it two numbers. So I'm just going to say 500, 500. That's like a length and a width. So that's one of the first things I'd have to do. We'll get on to the rest tomorrow.